St. Louis is a city and port in the U.S. state of Missouri. The city developed along the western bank of the Mississippi River, which forms Missouri's border with Illinois. In 2010, St. Louis had a population of 319,294. A 2013 estimate put the population at 318,416, making it the 60th most populous U.S. city and the second largest city in the state in terms of city proper population. The St. Louis metropolitan area includes the city as well as nearby areas in Missouri and Illinois, with a population of 2,905,893. It is the largest in Missouri and one of the largest in the United States. St. Louis was founded in 1764 by Pierre Leclerc and Auguste Chouteau and named after Louis IX of France. Claimed first by the French, who settled mostly east of the Mississippi River. The region in which the city stands was ceded to Spain following France's defeat in the 7 Years' War. Its territory east of the Mississippi was ceded to the Kingdom of Great Britain, the victor. The area of present-day Missouri was part of Spanish Louisiana from 1762 until 1803. After the United States acquired this territory in the Louisiana Purchase, St. Louis developed as a major port on the Mississippi River. In the late 19th century, St. Louis was ranked as the fourth largest city in the United States. It separated from St. Louis County in 1877, becoming an independent city and limiting its political boundaries. In 1904, it hosted the Louisiana Purchase Exposition and the Summer Olympics. Immigration has increased, and the city is the center of the largest Bosnian population in the world outside their homeland. The economy of St. Louis relies on service, manufacturing, trade, transportation of goods, and tourism. The city is home to several major corporations including Express Scripts, Peabody Energy, Amerin, Ralcorp, and Sigma-Aldrich, as well as a large medical and research community. St. Louis has 3 professional sports teams: the St. Louis Cardinals of Major League Baseball, the St. Louis Blues of the National Hockey League, and the St. Louis Rams of the National Football League. The city is commonly identified with the 630-foot tall Gateway Arch in downtown St. Louis. History. The area that would become St. Louis was a center of the Native American Mississippian culture, which built numerous temple and residential earthwork mounds on both sides of the Mississippi River. Their major regional center was at Cahokia Mounds, active from 900 AD to 1500 AD. Due to numerous major earthworks within St. Louis boundaries, the city was nicknamed as the Mound City. These mounds were mostly demolished during the city's development. Historic Native American tribes in the area included the Siouan-speaking Osage people, whose territory extended west, and the Illiniwek. European exploration of the area was recorded in 1673, when French explorers Louis Joliet and Jacques Marquette traveled through the Mississippi River Valley. 5 years later, La Salle claimed the region for France as part of La Louisiane. The earliest European settlements in the area were built in Illinois country on the east side of the Mississippi River during the 1690s and early 1700s at Cahokia, Kaskaskia, and Fort des Chartres. Migrants from the French villages on the opposite side of the Mississippi River founded Sainte Genevieve in the 1730s. In early 1764, after France lost the 7 Years' War, Pierre Leclerc and his stepson Auguste Chouteau founded what was to become the city of St. Louis. The early French families built the city's economy on the fur trade with the Osage, as well as with more distant tribes along the Missouri River. The Chouteau brothers gained a monopoly from Spain on the fur trade with Santa Fe. French colonists used African slaves as domestic servants and workers in the city. From 1762 to 1803, European control of the area west of the Mississippi to the northernmost part of the Missouri River Basin, called Louisiana, was assumed by the Spanish as part of the Viceroyalty of New Spain. In 1780, during the American Revolutionary War, St. Louis was attacked by British forces, mostly Native American allies, in the Battle of St. Louis. 19th century St. Louis was transferred to the French First Republic in 1800, then sold by the French to the U.S. in 1803 as part of the Louisiana Purchase. The town became the territorial capital and gateway to the Western Territory. Shortly after the official transfer of authority was made, the Lewis and Clark expedition was commissioned by President Thomas Jefferson. The expedition departed from St. Louis in May 1804 along the Missouri River to explore the vast territory. There were hopes of finding a water route to the Pacific Ocean, but the party had to go overland in the Upper West. They reached the Pacific Ocean via the Columbia River in summer 1805. They returned, reaching St. Louis on September 23, 1806. Both Lewis and Clark lived in St. Louis after the expedition. Many other explorers, settlers, and trappers would later take a similar route to the west. The city elected its first municipal legislators in 1808. Steamboats first arrived in St. Louis in 1818, improving connections with New Orleans and eastern markets. Missouri was admitted as a state in 1821, in which slavery was legal. As the state gained settlers, the first temporary capital of the state of Missouri was St. Louis. Then the capital of Missouri moved to St. Charles. Mo then moved to the more central location of Jefferson City, Mo, in 1826. St. Louis was incorporated as a city in 1822, and continued to develop largely due to its busy port and trade connections. Slaves worked in many jobs on the waterfront as well as on the riverboats. Given the city's location close to the Free State of Illinois and others, some slaves escaped to freedom. Others, especially women with children, sued in court in freedom suits, and several prominent local attorneys aided slaves in these suits. About half the slaves achieved freedom in hundreds of suits before the American Civil War. Immigrants from Ireland and Germany arrived in St. Louis in significant numbers starting in the 1840s, and the population of St. Louis grew from less than 20,000 in 1840, to 77,860 in 1850, to more than 160,000 by 1860. By the mid-1800s, St. Louis had a greater population than New Orleans. Settled by many Southerners in a slave state, the city was split in political sympathies and became polarized during the American Civil War. In 1861, 28 civilians were killed in a clash with Union troops. The war hurt St. Louis economically, due to the Union blockade of river traffic to the south on the Mississippi River. The St. Louis arsenal constructed ironclads for the Union Navy. After the war, St. Louis profited via trade with the West, aided by the 1874 completion of the Eads Bridge, named for its architect. Industrial developments on both banks of the river were linked by the bridge, the first in the Midwest over the Mississippi River. The bridge connects St. Louis, Mo to East St. Louis, Ill. The Eads Bridge became an iconic image of the city of St. Louis, from the time of its erection until 1965, where the Gateway Arch Bridge was constructed. The bridge crosses the St. Louis riverfront between Laclede's Landing, to the north, and the grounds of the Gateway Arch, to the south. Today the road deck has been restored, allowing vehicular and pedestrian traffic to cross the river. The St. Louis Metrolink light rail system has used the rail deck since 1993. An estimated 8,500 vehicles pass through it daily. On August 22, 1876, the city of St. Louis voted to secede from St. Louis County and become an independent city. Industrial production continued to increase during the late 19th century. Major corporations such as the Anheuser-Busch Brewery and Ralston Purina Company were established. St. Louis also was home to Desloger Consolidated Lead Company and several brass-era automobile companies, including the Success Automobile Manufacturing Company. St. Louis is the site of the Wainwright Building, an early skyscraper built in 1892 by noted architect Louis Sullivan. 20th century. In 1904, the city hosted the 1904 World's Fair and the 1904 Summer Olympics, becoming the first non-European city to host the Olympics. Permanent facilities and structures remaining from the fair are Forest Park and associated structures within its boundaries, the St. Louis Art Museum, the St. Louis Zoo and the Missouri History Museum. In the aftermath of emancipation of slaves following the Civil War, social and racial discrimination in housing and employment were common in St. Louis. Starting in the 1910s, many property deeds included racial or religious restrictive covenants against new immigrants and migrants. In the first half of the 20th century, St. Louis was a destination for many African Americans in the Great Migration from the rural South seeking better opportunities. During World War II, the NAACP campaigned to integrate war factories, and restrictive covenants were prohibited in 1948 by the Shelley v. Creamer U.S. Supreme Court decision, which case originated as a lawsuit in St. Louis. In 1964, civil rights activists protested at the construction of the Gateway Arch to publicize their effort to gain entry for African Americans into the skilled trade unions, where they were underrepresented. The Department of Justice filed the first suit against the unions under the Civil Rights Act of 1964. De jure educational segregation continued into the 1950s, and de facto segregation continued into the 1970s, leading to a court challenge and inter-district desegregation agreement. Students have been bused mostly from the city to county school districts to have opportunities for integrated classes, although the city has created magnet schools to attract students. St. Louis, like many Midwestern cities, expanded in the early 20th century due to industrialization, which provided jobs to new generations of immigrants and migrants from the South. It reached its peak population of 856,796 at the 1950 census. Suburbanization from the 1950s through the 1990s dramatically reduced the city's population, as did restructuring of industry and loss of jobs. The effects of suburbanization were exacerbated by the relatively small geographical size of St. Louis due to its earlier decision to become an independent city, and it lost much of its tax base. During the 19th and 20th century, most major cities aggressively annexed surrounding areas as residential development occurred away from the central city. However, St. Louis was unable to do so. In the 21st century, the city of St. Louis contains only 11% of its total metropolitan population, while among the top 20 metro areas in the United States. The central cities contain an average of 24% of total metropolitan area population. Although small increases in population have taken place in St. Louis during the early 2000s, overall the city lost population from 2000 to 2010. Immigration has continued, with the city attracting Vietnamese, Latinos from Mexico and Central America, and Bosnians, the latter forming the largest Bosnian community outside of Bosnia. Several urban renewal projects were built in the 1950s, as the city worked to replace old and substandard housing. Some of these were poorly designed and resulted in problems, of which Pruitt-Ego became a symbol of failure. It was torn down. Since the 1980s, several revitalization efforts have focused on downtown St. Louis. 21st century urban revitalization continued in the new century. Gentrification has taken place in the Washington Avenue Historic District, In 2006, St. Louis received the World Leadership Award for Urban Renewal. In 2013, the U.S. Census Bureau estimate that St. Louis had a population of 318,416. In 2014, St. Louis celebrated its 250th birthday with events throughout the year. These were coordinated by the Missouri History Museum through its non-profit entity, SGL 250, with help from the St. Louis Ambassadors Volunteer Organization and its U.S. Small Business Institute. Commemorations of the ARC's 50th birthday are planned for 2015.